All right, Shalom. I want to start off as always by giving all praises and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai, Bahashim, B'cha HaKodash. Double honors unto the apostles, the elders, and the bishops of Great Millstone. I want to send much love unto the brothers out there doing his work in truth and sincerity, and also want to send peace and blessings unto the believers of the hopeful elect. And in this lesson, I wanted to do a quick overview of the book of Ephesians, the second chapter, and just break it down here through the Spirit, and Lord willing, this is edifying. Now, this chapter here is a very controversial chapter, and the reason being is because certain Christians like to use this chapter to speak about how all nations can be saved and that anybody can be grafted into Israel through Christ. This is their stance. This is their doctrine. But we know that it's not true. We know through the scriptures, through understanding that the Gentiles who received salvation in the New Testament, right, who received the promises, were Israelites. And the Apostle Paul makes that clear in his epistles if you have understanding. But this is why Peter said that some of Paul's epistles are hard to be understood. And if you don't have understanding, you will twist the scriptures, right? And you will make it to something that is not. And this is what the Christian church does, all right? They have formed a whole doctrine based around lies and hypocrisy. But the Lord has raised up his men in these last days to bring forth true edification and to give the sense of what the Bible really is talking about. So I want to get into this chapter here. Lord willing, this is edifying, shouldn't be too long, hopefully through the Spirit, man. All right. So starting here at the top, this is Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1. It says, "And you had he quickened who were dead in trespasses and sins," right? You had he quickened. What does it mean to be quickened, right? What does it mean by quickened? If you go here, hold on. Oh man, they don't have the strong number for it. So, let me see here. That's interesting. I thought they had the strong number for that. For quickened. They don't have the strong number. Well, the word quicken means to be made alive. All right. I'm not sure what's going on here, why they don't have the strong number for it. It should be a strong number for it. Matter of fact, when you go to John 6 and 63, let's go to that real quick, because I don't know why they don't have a word for quicken there. It should be a word for quicken in that scripture, but don't worry, we'll go here to John 6 and 63 about being quickened, right? So you go here to John 6 and 63. And our Lord Yahushua said this, it says, "It is the spirit that quickened or quickened. The flesh profited nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirits and they are life." So this is how we was made quickened. It was by hearing our brother preach the word. And our spirits were brought back to life, man, through the preaching of the gospel. Okay, now there should be a word for quickened here in this verse. So, yep, here we go. For quickened.
Strong's G 2227, Zoa Poieo. Zoa Poieo.
Right, so it says to produce alive, beget or bear living young, to cause to live, make alive, give life. This is what happened unto us, man, who came into the faith, right? It says by spiritual power to arouse and invigorate, to restore to life, right? This is what the gospel has done unto us, man. It's restored us back to life, bro. Connected us back unto our God through his son Yahweh Shai. It says to give increase of life, thus of physical life, of the spirit, quickening as respect of the spirit, endued with new and greater powers of life. Metaphor of seeds quickening into life, germinating, springing up, growing. So the word, okay, has quickened us, man. So going here back to Ephesians now, it says, and you had he quickened, meaning brought back to life, okay, restored back to life, who were dead in trespasses and in sins, right? How were we dead in trespasses and sins? Because we weren't keeping the law. To break the law is to trespass or to transgress. Matter of fact, we had no knowledge of the law, okay? Now, granted, we did certain things in the world that was in line with the law, right? Paul speaks about that in Romans chapter 2. But ultimately, we transgressed and we was in sin, bro, okay? Going completely off. But yet, even in our dead state, the Lord had mercy and he quickened us, man. And he brought us back into the truth, right? And we pray to stay in this thing, you know? Verse 2 says, where in time past, meaning before you came into the faith, right? Ye walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. So there's a spirit, man, that's in these people that's causing them to be disobedient, man. All right? That spirit also was in us. Going off, you know, committing adultery, serving idols, eating unclean foods. That's how we were brought up, okay? But it's a spirit that's working on these people, man, and got them doing all kind of crazy things, man. Demons, all right? It says, among whom also we all had, right? We all, okay? Every last one of us had our conversation or our conduct in time past in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. So we was going completely off, okay? Completely off. I know I was. It says, but the Most High, who is rich in mercy, for his great love, wherewith he loved us, even when we were dead in sins, right? Even when we was complete niggas, okay? Doing any and everything, right? Even when we were dead in sins, had quickened us together with Hamashiach. By grace are ye saved. So the Lord loved us, man. And he had this love for us before the foundation of the world. He already had his chosen, you know? Now, we know the scriptures say what? Many are called, but few are chosen, okay? A lot of people came into the faith, man. They tasted of this heavenly word, of this truth, of the powers to come, and yet they went back into the world, back into the dead state that they once was at. And now they're worse off than they was before, you know? But we're hoping and praying, man, to stick this thing out, because we know that at the end of this hell, this captivity of doing this work, all these things, man, is a kingdom that we can't even imagine. Power we can't even imagine. Righteousness, holiness, resources, family, women, children, slaves. I mean, you name it. We're going to get it all, okay? So it's worth fighting for, all right? But we didn't get here without the Most High's grace. Can no man boast and say, oh, I brought myself into the truth, or I'm here because of me? No, you're not. You're here because the Most High wants you here, okay? Plain and simple. So by grace are you saved, it says, and has raised us up together and made us sit together in heavenly places in Hamashiach Yahweh Shai, that in the ages to come he might show the exceeding riches of his grace and his kindness to usward through Hamashiach Yahweh Shai. For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is a gift of the Most High, not of works, lest any man should boast, right? This is by the Most High's grace, His mercy. It's a gift, man. It's a gift from the Lord. So none of us can boast. You shouldn't boast, man, but you got certain men in this thing who are boasting, all right? And we see how that turned out for them. Being boastful, being proud, man. No, bro. The Lord will humble you if you don't humble yourself, okay? He will humble you, man. It says, for we are His workmanship, created in Hamashiach Yahushai, unto good works, which the Most High had ordained, which the Most High had before ordained that we should walk in them. So it was set up from the beginning, man, for us to do these good works, right? To preach, to do whatever, that's tending to the ministry of pushing His word out, man. So our lives have been set up from the foundation of the world, bro. This is written for us to do this, okay? And look, bro, I am elated to be able to say that, hey, I'm a part of the ministry, man. I get a chance to do the work that Yahushua did, bro, and help in preaching the gospel, and building up the church, man. Being a part of this thing, that is a blessing, bro. Okay, a blessing, a great blessing, and there's a great reward for it too. All right, as I spoke about earlier. Verse 11, right? So this will we get down, to Christians being confused and bugged out. Okay, they get down here to verse 11, and they just start getting moist and all over the place. Okay, through. So we're gonna read this here, man, and we're gonna get some understanding. All right, because Ephesians 2:11 doesn't mean what Christians say that it means. All right, I've heard them debate. They did a terrible job, terrible job in breaking down these few verses here, right? So Ephesians 2:11, right? It says, "Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands." Now, when a Christian break down this right here, right, when it says that ye being time past Gentiles in the flesh, I heard a Jake preacher say, you see, it says Gentiles in the flesh. So this means that there were non-Israelites, brother. It says Gentiles in the flesh. So this is how the Christian dude broke it down. Jake, bugged out. I said, there is no way that this man really just said that. He said, because it says, Gentiles in the flesh, that means that they're non-Israelite, brother. Matter of fact, he was telling IUIC that. There was a couple years ago, man. Oh yeah, man. This was a couple years ago. Okay, they had a debate with some Christians, bro. And I'm like, bro, this dude really don't understand. So let's reread this verse here, bro, and let's get some understanding, okay? Because it's not that hard, all right? It's not that hard. It says, "Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands." What does this mean? That ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh. In time past, meaning what? Before you came into the faith, you were living like the Gentiles. This is what Paul is saying right here, bro. This is not saying that you were Gentiles, as in you was a non-Israelite. He's saying, look, before you came into the faith, in time past, you was doing the works of Gentiles in the flesh, being wicked, being abominable. This is why reading is important, right? You go back up to Ephesians 2, right? In verse 2, what does it say? Where in time past, right? Ye walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience, among whom also we all had our conversation in time past, and the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. So in other words, you were living like the nations. You did as the world did. You wasn't following the Most High. You was living like a Gentile. So when you go back down to verse 11, now you see what Paul is saying. So wherefore remember that in time past, right, that ye been in time past Gentiles in the flesh, meaning you lived like the heathen. You did the works of the heathen. Okay? It says, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called a circumcision in the flesh made by hands. Why were the circumcision calling these individuals uncircumcised? Why is that? Because they knew that they were Israelites, but guess what? They wasn't keeping the law. So they were considered uncircumcised, heathens. Okay, they were being called that. They weren't actual heathens by nationality. They were being called heathen because of their conducts, all right, how they carried themselves as the heathen, right? Let's get this verse here in the NLT, then I'm going to grab a precept. So this is Ephesians 2:11 in the NLT here. It says, don't forget that you Gentiles used to be outsiders. You were called uncircumcised heathens by the Jews, who were proud of their circumcision, even though it affected only their bodies and not their hearts. So these Jews, these Israelites, were calling these Gentiles uncircumcised heathens. Why? Because they wasn't circumcised according to the law. They wasn't keeping the custom. So it said, no, you niggas are uncircumcised heathens. You are Gentiles. You are not Israelites. You are an outsider. Matter of fact, we don't even recognize you. This is how they were treated. Okay? It's not that hard to understand, man. But you Christians make it hard because you have no understanding. You don't have the Holy Spirit. Now, let's go to Romans 2. Okay? To further see why these Jews were referring to them as uncircumcised. All right? You go to Romans 2 here and start at verse 25. It says, for circumcision barely profited if thou keep the law, right? But if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision. So they were breakers of the law. That's why they kept calling them heathens, Greeks, Gentiles, this, that, everything but an Israelite. It's not that hard to understand, bro. Okay? It's not that hard. But you Christians, you make it hard because you don't have any understanding. Okay? So back in Ephesians 2:11, it says, wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. That at that time, meaning what? When you weren't in the truth, okay, that at that time you were without Hamashiach, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, okay, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without the Most High in the world. Now, let's get the word aliens here, right? It said there were aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of the promise. Now, I want to get a few words here in this verse, all right, and also get a precept. So it says being aliens, okay, apolatriao. I know this word right here because I used to look it up all the time, okay. So I'm gonna let Esau pronounce it. I already know the word. Let me chill out.
Strong's G 526, apolatriao. Apolatriao.
Mm-hmm. What it says: to alienate, estrange, to be shut out from one's fellowship and intimacy. Why did the Jews alienate them? Because they wasn't keeping the laws. They didn't come up in the customs. So they were shut out from the Commonwealth of Israel. What is the Commonwealth of Israel? Let's go to Romans 9 and let's get some of the Commonwealth of Israel, right? Romans 9, and let's start at verse 3. It says, "For I could wish that myself were accursed from Mashiach, from my brethren, my kinsmen, kinsmen according to the flesh, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption." So only Israelites can be adopted. Okay, vocab Malone? If you're not an Israelite, you can't be adopted. It says, "And the glory, and the covenants, and the giving of the law, and the service of God, and the promises." They were shut out from this before they came into Yahweh Shai. Right? The Commonwealth of Israel, man. Us having the laws and the customs, bro. You know, keeping the Passover, rest of the high holy days, they couldn't partake in none of that. If they would have even came close to the temple, they would have got killed. Because Jake wasn't going, okay? Jake wasn't going, man. So, and then it says strangers from the covenants of promise. Who are the promises for? I just read it. Israelites. If you're not an Israelite, you ain't getting the promises, bro. It's not that hard, okay? But you Christians make it hard without understanding. Right? So there were strangers from the covenants of promise, meaning what? They had no knowledge of it. Okay? They had no knowledge of it. Here we go.
Strong's G 3581. Xenos.
It says a foreigner, a stranger, alien from a person or thing, without the knowledge of, without a share in. Do you see that, brother? So they were Israelites, but they had no knowledge of being an Israelite, of the covenants, of the promises, of our forefathers, of the Most High God, Yahweh. They had no understanding, bro. They were completely bugged out, serving Greco-Roman gods, being gay, being lesbian, eating unclean foods, tattoos, bald heads, butt naked, all kinds of weird stuff, man. Talking about some damn Zeus, okay? And Poseidon, right? And Hercules, a bunch of damn idols. Okay? Jupiter. They were completely bugged out, bro. They didn't know, bro, like us. Just like us, bro. We was in the world. We had no knowledge of Israel, no sharing, nothing. Okay? We were eating chips, right? Watching the football game, gang banging, you know, committing adultery, you know, being a damn Sigma or Alpha or Q dog, but whatever, bro. Through. Okay, it says new, unheard of. Okay. They brother, they had no knowledge of it. This was new to them. This was unheard of to them. Okay. So they were strangers from the covenants of promise, right? It says that at the time you were without Hamashiach, being aliens from the Commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without the Most High in the world. This was their current, this was their condition before Yahweh Shai, man. Also for us too. Okay, we was in the world through no hope until we came into Yahweh Shai and found out the truth, right? It says, but now in Hamashiach Yahweh Shai, ye who sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Hamashiach. Okay, what made them far off? Them living like the heathens, serving their gods, taking on their identity. Okay, they was far off in the spirit, man. But by the blood of Yahweh Shai, they was made nigh back unto the truth. Okay, it says, for he is our peace, who had made both one and had broken down the middle wall or partition between us. Okay, that division. It says, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments, containing ordinances, for to make in himself of twain one new man, so making peace. So the Lord tore down, all right, that division between the tribes, that barrier, man, all right, of the law. They was able to come back, bro, through the blood of Yahweh by faith, okay? They didn't need the law to come back to the Most High. They needed faith in the blood of Yahweh to be able to come back, bro. And then the Jews at that time, our forefathers, couldn't understand that. This is why they kept trying to push the law. And I'm like, nah, bro, you got to keep the law, bro, which they had to keep the law, somewhat, okay? But they were standing by faith in Yahweh Shai. And they couldn't understand that, all right? But this is why Paul breaking this stuff down. It says, and that he might reconcile both to the Most High in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby, right? Reconcile. How can you reconcile someone back to something they was never part of? It's impossible to do, okay? And see, these words like this, they get skipped over by Christians, man, and people who just, want to be foolish, man. You can't be reconciled back to something that you never was a part of, okay?
Strong's G 604, apakatalasso. Apakatalasso.
It says to reconcile completely, to reconcile back again, bring back a former state of harmony. Whenever has a non-Israelite had harmony with the Most High? When has ever a non-Israelite been a part of the covenants and the promises? They never have been. So clearly these Gentiles, whom Paul is speaking about, are Israelites. Only they can be brought back into something that they were a part of. Once again, you cannot be brought back to something that you never was a part of. Okay? You can't. And this is why Christians have no understanding. They'll read that and still have an excuse. All right? Reconcile, man. Colossians 1:21. I'm having fun right now, too. I'm having fun. Colossians 1:21, it says, and you that were sometimes alienated, right? Alienated, that were shut out, right? And enemies in your mind by wicked works. Yet now had he reconciled. He brought you back. Only Israelites can be reconciled to the Most High, bro. Okay? To the covenants and the promises. It says, in the body of his flesh through death, to present you holy and unblameable and unreprovable in his sight. Straight to the point, right? So reading on here, verse 17 says, and came and preached peace to you, which were afar off, and to them that were nigh. For through him we both have access by one Spirit unto the Father. It says, now therefore, ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens, with the saints and of the household of the Most High. Okay, let's get the word fellow citizens, right? Paul said, y'all not strangers and foreigners no more. Okay, that's in the past. Now you're a fellow citizen, okay, with the saints or the Israelites. Okay, in other words, you have come back to your nationality.
Strong's G 4847. Sympalites.
It says, possessing the same citizenship with others, a fellow citizen. They were Israelites. They came back to the knowledge of being Israel. It says, of Gentiles as received into communion of the saints, of the people consecrated to the Most High. They were Israelites. Okay, they came back to their heritage in so many words. It says, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Yahweh Shai HaMashiach himself being the chief cornerstone. in whom all the building fitly framed together groweth into an holy temple in the Lord, in whom ye also are builded together for an habitation of the Most High through the Spirit. So that's a quick overview of this chapter, man. I pray it was edifying. This is a good read, and it's something that you got to understand, bro, because Christians like to go into this chapter to try and prove a point when they don't have a point, okay? They ain't got no point. But it's good for us to know these things so that when they do come, you can shut down their so-called arguments of anybody can be saved and grafted through Christ, okay? A bunch of madness. Shalom.